Becca, I was thinking about de escalating behavior. So we all have a choice, and tricky behavior is happening. It's happening in every single classroom. If it's not happening yet in your classroom, it will be soon. Like it's just part of what we do. Is tricky behavior is happening. But lots of times we're trying to de-escalate it, and we're trying to de-escalate early. And one of the things that as teachers we often use would be like a proximity, would be a getting lower, would be like quieting our voice. And I just know like sometimes I do this with a student, and like you're close and you're quiet, and they say something like, ew, your breath stinks so bad. Like, or you smell disgusting. What's wrong with you? Do you have you experienced this? Am I the only one?
Oh, totally. Totally. No. Yeah. I would have told you that like little kids are the ones to call you out on these things like, "Oh my gosh, there's something black in your teeth," or like, "Ew, you have so many boogers in your nose," right? Like they're known for saying that.
Hmm. Like it's just, it's like a defense mechanism. We're gonna push away. And so for me, in those moments, rather than like trying to correct that or say, "Oh, don't, that's rude, we wouldn't talk like that," I just usually make a joke like, "Well, of course my breath smells. I ate onions for lunch. I really wasn't expecting to have this conversation right now." And I'll diffuse it that way. My guess is you ignore it a lot.
Usually I ignore it if I can see that like either that kid that child who made the comment is going to keep escalating or the other kids are watching to see how I'm going to respond. I'll say something like, "Oh man, the booger monster came," or whatever, right? Like I'll make them laugh and to show like, "Oh man, that didn't bug me," and like we're okay right now.
Tricky behaviors happen in all classrooms. When we have a plan for how to respond, we are able to relax and focus our attention on the act of teaching. We share a simple framework to respond to tricky behaviors. It is called the OWL framework, and it helps us stay rooted in connecting to students and keeping our attention on learning. This is Sticky Hope.
Yeah, I think our reactions, our choices in those moments can escalate or de-escalate a situation. And we have to remember it's not about us. They're
It's
not
not
attacking
it's
us.
it's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about you. I like say that over and over to myself when these tricky behaviors are happening. But what is true is that the adult in the room does have some influence on whether we can de-escalate a situation. And that's what we wanted to talk a little bit about today is in that moment when you can feel a situation could be escalating, or sometimes you're in the middle of a situation that is escalating. Like, what do we do, and how can we keep our wits about us? And so, one of the things that we explored when we were writing Connection First, one of the tools that we were able to create is the OWL framework for tricky behavior. So, you are a Harry Potter fan, which I think by default makes you a fan of owls.
Absolutely. Um, we spent a lot of time thinking about the meaning of owls. Owls hold a lot of meaning in education. Um, but also, I mean, owls are a huge part of the Harry Potter series and Hedwig, Harry Potter's owl, is a huge character and there's a lot of symbolism in all of that. Um, and if we stop and consider owls just as an animal, how they're all seeing and they can see in the dark, and almost like they bring knowledge in dark situations, um, that holds a lot of meaning when especially we're looking at tricky behaviors, right? Like really hard situations. We have the power to bring understanding. We have the power to see children in the midst of the hard. Um, and it can just be this really meaningful moment, and it will be a meaningful moment and you get to choose to make it like a powerful and positive meaningful moment.
So for the OWL framework, it's OWL is the acronym, and it starts with open to connection. The W is work to de-escalate, and the L is return to learning. Because we want to keep in mind, yes, tricky behavior is happening, and we're here to learn. And a teacher is here to teach. And so part of this framework is getting back to that as soon as possible. So open to connection, work to de-escalate, return to learning. And we'd like to just go through each of those parts and thinking about what might that look like in the moment. So open to connection, we start with connection first.
Right. Um, the power of connecting, especially in the midst of those moments where either escalation has already started or you notice it's about to begin, connection and being open to it is a critical step, right? It is the first step, and you need to be ready for kids to connect with you, and you need to show them with things like your body language and how close you are to them, your tone of voice and your facial expressions, that you're there, you're in this with them. They don't have to do this alone, and you're not criticizing who they are or what they're doing. You're there to support them.
I think I've been learning a lot. Like, it's not necessarily open to connection is not necessarily what I say, but just what my presence is bringing to that situation, and being ultra aware that oftentimes when we're beginning to see some tricky behavior, the student doesn't want to be acting that way either. So a really common tricky behavior that we see in upper grades would be vaping. And I bring this one up because I think, like, all of those who are dealing with students who this is common, like, you just go through the motions, like you find a vape and it's an office referral or whatever. Like, it's just that these motions that you go through. And when I was thinking about the OWL framework and that kind of thing, that's this common behavior that we just go through the motions, I was like, I think I miss the opportunity to connect sometimes. And it can be something as simple as, oh man, I wish this didn't happen. And then I'm just going to go through the rest of it. And oftentimes kids don't escalate in those situations. Sometimes they do, which will move us to the next one. But that open to connection, even when it's a behavior we've seen before, even when we're not surprised by the behavior, just a simple line of, man, I wish this were different, or, ugh, I bet, I'm sure that you didn't mean to rip up the paper either, or that you wish it were different too.
Yeah. In the lower grades, I see a lot of moments where, like, kids are often even surprised by their own behavior, right? They like do something and then they look at the teacher immediately like, oh, like I shouldn't have done that. And whether they're saying that or not, your reaction, your choice in that moment can either like bring the situation back down to baseline or shoot it right up to an escalated situation, because things move so quickly. And in those moments, where the kid grabs a toy and then is like, ooh, I'm not supposed to do that, right? Like, they're learning how to ask instead of just grab. You can be like, oh man, that was a tricky situation. I wonder what you'll do next. Like, and that is connecting, saying like, I see you, I see that, you're acknowledging, you're seeing that shouldn't have happened, and how are you going to respond? Instead of like, why did you do that? We don't take toys, right? Like, that's going to send that kid keep going up that continuum, instead of like, oh, I made a mistake and I can fix it. And that moment of connection, that acknowledgement, is a huge step. Sometimes it helps, and sometimes it's the first step in this framework, and you have to keep going. And the next step is working to de-escalate.
Yeah, and you're right on. Like, it's a moment, right? It's a sentence, it's hand to the shoulder. And then if the behavior continues to escalate, we're going to work to de-escalate. And so I think, like, this part of the framework reminds me as a teacher is like, I have influence here. Like, yes, this behavior is out of control. I'm not able to control the student. They have free will, and depending on where they are in their brain, they could be like stuck in their brainstem. We don't know, but I can work to de-escalate. And so in this, one of the things I know that one of my go-to is I'm just going to try to give some space. Yeah, I'm going to make sure everybody's safe, and then I'm just going to give some space with the intent that that space is going to help the student calm down a little bit.
Yeah. So in the younger grades or in my experiences, I try to give space. It's not always the most effective with the younger kids because they can get more physical more quickly, and so like safety has to be the first priority. And my students will always tell you, like, my number one job is to keep them safe, and my number two job is to help them learn. And I think in those moments where the escalation has continued and it's my choice now to work to de-escalate, like that word work, first of all, it's like a word you and I have thought really a lot about, and it is work, and you have to choose to do the work of de-escalation because you're going to be in the midst of it, and you can either work to de-escalate or you can watch it happen, right? But the escalation happen. But when you work to de-escalate, you are choosing to continue to be that calm person in the presence of a hard situation. And you might do things like getting quieter and like turning the lights down, or you might put on quiet music or turn off some sounds that are happening, right? Depending on the kid, depending on what you're noticing, you might choose to put on a favorite song, right? That might help them feel connected and regulated again. Um, there are lots of things that can happen. It is up to you to choose how you're going to de-escalate that situation, and that you're going to de-escalate that situation because you do have that role in that situation.
Yeah, at this time, there's also maybe some regulation tools that you can tap. So maybe you have like a weighted, in really young grades, we might have like weighted animals that can go across their shoulders or across their laps. There might be like a stress ball or some sort of fidget tool that we're giving students. Maybe some students might have like headphones that they're going to noise canceling headphones. That might be an option. So we're accessing the tools that we have, um, in our room, trying, again, working to de-escalate the situation.
I think another thing, as you said that, like, you've done a lot of work already before these situations are happening to help you work in these moments, right? You've taught them how to use all of these strategies so that when you say to them, here, like, let's try this weighted animal, it's not the first time they've seen the animal. They're not wondering why you're putting this stuffed animal on their shoulders or why you're handing them this ball. Like, they know the purpose of these tools and how to use them because you've practiced and taught them about these things when everybody was regulated. So when the dysregulation happens, they're ready to use them. Their brain knows what to do without them needing to think hard about it. And that's an important part of the work. That's part of de-escalating that happens way before the escalation even started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're exactly right. The last episode, we talked about the kind of teachers that we want to be and deciding that, outside of the moment. And the same is true here. In this section of the framework, the work to de-escalate, the tools that we're bringing in are tools that we've practiced outside when everybody's regulated.
Yeah.
So that's when we're practicing different kinds of deep breathing. That's when we're practicing. What else would we practice?
Yeah, you're practicing. Yeah. Um, Before you're in those moments of escalation, you're practicing things like movements and stretches and exercises. You're practicing using tools like the lazy 8 and ways to cross the midline. In the younger grades, we have something that in my class we call the dragon egg, and it's like literally a weighted workout ball, but they carry the dragon egg to somewhere else in the building, but they know the path that the dragon egg goes on. They know who they can bring it to. There are all kinds of strategies that you are teaching that access different parts of their brains that will regulate either their cognitive like needs or their emotional needs or their physical needs that they'll already know how to do when the dysregulation hits.
So we're going to work to de-escalate, and then in the framework, the hope is to return to learning. Now, Becca, you said it, so beautifully. My number one job is to keep everyone physically safe. My number two job is to teach and for us to learn. So, in this framework, we're working to de-escalate. Assuming that we've de-escalated, we're going to return to learning as quickly as possible. And this is something that's relatively new learning for me. It's not what I used to do, but I'm learning that as more tricky behavior is entering our classrooms, and it is like that. There's statistics that are backing it up. Like our classrooms are full of different behavior than what they were 6 or 7 years ago. And so I'm trying to quickly return to learning and not lingering in like the correction of the behavior. I'm returning to learning, knowing that I can always swoop back at a later time, maybe when my head is a little more clear to that situation. But like in that moment, if I've got it de-escalated enough, and now that doesn't mean that the student is compliant or doing the exact thing, but that means like they're not disrupting everybody else, and we can return to learning as quickly as possible in this moment, at least returning most of the students to learning.
Yeah, an important part of all of this, of the OWL framework, but also of navigating tricky behaviors is we're at school to learn, right? And we need to make sure that that message is clear too. Now, remember that we're all about connection first, right? So like that's why it's the first step of this framework. And we are always going to do the things to connect with children to make sure that they're ready to learn. But we're also not going to let a tricky behavior take over the entire day, right? We're not going to lose an entire day of learning to the tricky behavior, because that's not what's best for kids either. We don't want to teach them that someone else's dysregulation or their own dysregulation is going to take over and ruin the rest of their day. My foster kids therapist often says like it's never too late to turn a day around, right? And so like we always get to decide if like the next choice we make is going to be a better choice, is going to be a choice that is going to help me learn, is going to help me be a better friend, is going to help everyone around me remember the awesome person that I am. And so returning to learning as fast as we can once the situation is safe and people are in a regulated enough state is going to actually bring another sense of normalcy, another sense of calm to a situation that like did not feel normal, did not feel calm a few minutes ago. Sometimes you have to have that conversation. You have to take those extra 5 minutes in that moment and have those conversations about like, oh, that was a really intense moment. But it's not like you're taking the next 3 hours and like canceling everything you're teaching and not doing anything else for the rest of the day, right? Like you're taking 5 minutes, you're having this repair conversation, you're doing some deep breathing together, and you're getting back to the lesson, because that's going to regulate everyone.
Yeah, in the upper grades, in middle and high school, some people, we have 43-minute periods, right? So like it's even like this, and we don't have a lot of time. And so returning to learning, what I've noticed as I've been in more and more middle and high schools and seeing some of this tricky behavior is a lot of kids, they just shut down. It's silence. And that sometimes is a really hard thing for me to walk away from. But this OWL framework has helped me, because I'm like, okay, work to de-escalate. Well, really, they're not escalated. I mean, they're not doing the work, but they're also not, their behavior, their emotions are not escalated. And so I've found myself then like with proximity. So moving away from that student and going and working with another group of students, or doing like a catch that's catching everybody and a reminder of, what the next step is, or like really just using proximity almost in that opposite way. So I use proximity to help de-escalate, and now I'm going to use proximity to return to learning. And I think growing in understanding and wisdom of what can I walk away from, where I used to think, oh, I can't walk away to this situation until this student is doing exactly what I asked them to do. And now I'm like, hey, this is not about me. And I most certainly can walk away, because my job here is to teach and for kids to be learning. We're including the OWL framework in our sticky hope notes. So if you haven't downloaded those, or you're not on our email list, you'll want to get these sticky hope notes, because I think like just that visual representation of the framework, it's been helping me as I've more intentionally work to connect first, work to de-escalate, and then return to learning.
Takeaway number 1. Having a plan for how to respond to tricky behaviors is important. The OWL framework is a simple and effective way to know what to do when challenging situations arise. The OWL framework reminds us of 3 steps: OWL. Open to connection, work to de-escalate, and return to learning. There is a visual representation of the OWL framework in the Sticky Hope notes. If you haven't downloaded these yet, you can find them at stickyhope.com. Takeaway number 2. Being open to connection means recognizing the first response is one that helps the student feel seen and valued. It happens in a moment, and we don't need to make it more complicated than it needs to be. We can simply acknowledge the challenge of the situation, or we can remind the student of who they are, even in tricky situations. Takeaway number 3. We must commit to the work of de-escalating behavior. We have the potential to escalate or de-escalate a situation. When we work to de-escalate, we're responding to the needs of the student and the conditions of the situation. It's important to keep in mind that the tools we plan to use during de-escalation need to be introduced and taught in moments of calm. Takeaway number 4. A teacher's job is to teach, so the sooner we can return to learning, the better. This doesn't mean that the student will be fully recovered, but that the situation has de-escalated enough that we can return our focus to helping the rest of the class engage in learning.